everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's webinar. My name is Shelley Melanson, and I'm the team lead for the PIPS Mobilization Department. Our department is a member of your internal transition team, which is dedicated to supporting your transfer to the public service. I'm joined today by David Griffin, negotiator, along with 3 civilian members who are members of the RCMP negotiations team. Daniel Chamberlain, team chair, Crystal Gardner, and Robert Robin. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shortly, we're going to hear from the team about this landmark agreement with Treasury Board on behalf of the RCMP civilian members. But before we get started, we wanted to go over some of the technical details of the webinar platform to ensure that everyone can actively participate in today's session. As you've likely realized, audio is being provided through the webinar service. To reduce the background noise and ensure the quality of audio for all your fellow participants, we've taken the liberty of muting your line. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment at any point in the session, you're welcome to do so by using the chat box in WebEx. To ask a question, you're going to select the chat bubble button in the bottom center of your screen. It should appear when you run your mouse over the center of the screen. This will cause the chat box to appear on the right-hand side of your screen when you select the chat box button. That looks like a little speech bubble. Select Ask a Question from the drop-down menu, recipient list menu, enter your question, and hit Send. For those logging in on mobile, the system's very similar. You're going to click in the menu in the top right-hand corner, select Ask a Question, enter your question, and hit Send. In the center of your screen, what you should currently see is the title slide for our PowerPoint presentation. Does anyone have a question about the technical aspects of the webinar system before we get started? Again, if you have a question, you're going to select the chat bubble button. You're going to select the Ask a Question from the drop-down recipient list, enter your question, and press Send. We'll wait just a moment just to see if there are any questions about the technical use of the system. Okay, we're not seeing any, so we'll keep going. The objective of today's session is to provide you with an overview of the essential details of the Memorandum of Agreement with Treasury Board, and then provide you with an opportunity to answer any questions or concerns you might have regarding the agreement and the transition process. We'll begin today's session with a presentation from the negotiation team and then move on to an open Q&A. I'd now like to introduce you to our guest speakers. David Griffin is the negotiator responsible for the RCMP CM group. A former police officer, David has over 25 years of experience representing police and civilian members of police associations across Canada, as well as the nurses in Ontario and the Ontario Nurses Association. Daniel Chamberlain is the chair of the RCMP CM negotiation team. Daniel has worked in several civilian classifications with the RCMP in the Atlantic and National Capital regions, as well as radio communication technologist, and is currently a member of the Electronic Engineer Group for the past 7 years. Daniel has been managing radio systems renewals across Canada. Crystal Gardner is a member of the RCMP CM negotiation team. Crystal currently works as a reporting scientist in the biology section of the National Forensic Laboratory Services in Edmonton. Crystal started her CM career as a reporting scientist in Regina and relocated to Edmonton Lab in 2014. Robert Robin is also a member of the negotiation team. Robert joined RCMP C Division in 1999 as a public servant. He's held various positions such as fleet management and within the Special One service. Specialized. Robert converted to civilian member status in 2008. He worked as a land administrator in C Division until 2016. He also served as a sub-rep for the SSR program from 2014 until the end of the program in 2017. After managing PTSSB deployment for G7 for the last year, Robert is now working with PTSSC Division as an SPCP02. Please join me in welcoming our speakers today. Now, before we delve into the details of the agreement, David, can you tell us a little bit about how we got here?
Yes, thank you, Shelley. As our civilian members know well, this issue has been around for a long time. In 2016, the Supreme Court of Canada issued a decision in a case called the Mounted Police Association of Ontario that recognized it was unconstitutional to prevent civilian and uniformed members in the RCMP from being included in bargaining units. Because of this, the Public Service Labor Relations Act was amended to allow civilian and uniform members to be employed by Treasury Board and subject to the same unionized environment as the federal public service. The employer was required to take concrete steps to ensure a practical transition into the core public service for civilian members. This is referred to as the deeming process. When it became apparent that PIPS would be receiving RCMP civilian members as a result of deeming, PIPS made application to the Labor Board to be certified as the bargaining agent. The official announcement of May 21, 2020 as the date of deeming was made in Part 1 of the Canada Gazette of April 7, 2018. On April 13th of 2018, PIPS was certified as the bargaining agent for all civilian members in the designated RCMP occupational groups, and these members were declared by the Labor Board as part of the Institute's existing bargaining units. PIPS also entered into an agreement with the Treasury Board concerning the continuation of current terms and conditions of employment for civilian members until the transition was negotiated. There was considerable preparation involved in getting ready for negotiations. This included research comparing the 6 collective agreements with the existing RCMP terms and conditions. We conducted site visits with civilian members in various regional sites across the country, and we conducted a survey of all the civilian members coming into the PIPS groups. 36% of our civilian members completed the survey, which is a high-rated response for this type of survey. Not surprisingly, the most important issues identified by civilian members in the survey were vacation, sick leave, and hours of work. We canvassed the membership for members to join the negotiation team, and we also held a 2-day negotiations conference for civilian members last November. Based on the feedback received from these activities, the negotiations team finalized our proposal package and delivered it to Treasury Board in January of this year. Through the process of negotiation, we sought to maintain the existing terms and conditions for 1,370 civilian members when they transitioned into the 6 PIPS core group collective agreements. These discussions took place at one central table, with a negotiation team representing the Institute, opposite a team representing Treasury Board, and supported by RCMP management. Treasury Board sought to align the terms and conditions of civilian members with the existing collective agreements, and were opposed to any changes that would maintain unique terms for civilian members after deeming. The employer frequently cited Phoenix as a reason that they could not create unique conditions for civilian members under the collective agreements. After 9 full days of negotiations spanning 3 sets of dates, the parties jointly requested the appointment of a mediator on May the 9th of 2019. We had reached an impasse on the issues most important to our members, those being vacation, sick leave, hours of work, and compensation.
So David, how does mediation differ from negotiation?
So mediation involves an experienced and impartial third party, the mediator, facilitating communication between the disputing parties. For disputes in our sector, the mediator is appointed by the Federal Public Sector Labor Relations and Employment Board and is considered a neutral. The mediator provides assistance to the parties to help them reach a mutually acceptable outcome. The mediator does not have the authority to decide the dispute, to solve issues, or to advocate for either party. Success in mediation would be a negotiated resolution agreed to by both parties, Treasury Board and the Institute. The stakes were high, however, because if mediation were to fail, there would be no agreement, and in this worst-case scenario, civilian members would simply be subject to the terms and conditions of the collective agreements upon deeming.
Well, it sounds pretty fortunate that the negotiation team was successful in reaching an agreement and avoiding that worst-case scenario.
That's correct. Through the efforts of the negotiation team, with support from PIPS President Debbie Davio and the PIPS staff team, we were able to reach an agreement that the team concluded was the best possible outcome under the circumstances at this time. The RCMP-CM Memorandum of Agreement, or the RCMP-CM MOA, is the first such agreement reached by unions representing civilian members. Since PIPS has signed this agreement, the Canadian Association of Professional Employees, CAPE, has signed the same agreement on behalf of their members. The agreement signed by PIPS forms part of the group settlements for ratification by the PIPS membership. If a PIPS group does not sign a new collective agreement before deeming, we have made provision for the MOA to be part of the existing collective agreements so that all of our civilian members will be protected upon deeming. Your terms and conditions will also continue until deeming, and you will continue to be pay matched and receive all wage increases negotiated under the collective agreements until deeming. We have also negotiated a parity clause, more commonly known as a Me Too clause, which protects our civilian members in the event another union obtains a more generous transition measure than what we have negotiated. The agreement cannot be amended without the written agreement of the Institute, and in the event that deeming is delayed, the agreement will be deferred and it does not have to be renegotiated.
Sounds like a pretty sound agreement that you've come to. Let's now get into the actual terms of the agreement that have been negotiated. Daniel, who does this agreement apply to?
Sure. The agreement applies to every civilian member who's deemed into the public service. It doesn't apply to members who leave or retire before the date of deeming. The provisions of the agreement continue for so long as the member remains in a bargaining unit represented by PIPSC, either within the RCMP or for those civilian members working at Shared Services Canada for as long as they remain with SSC or RCMP. So Treasury Board made this exception because of a unique history to the civilian members that were transferred involuntarily to Shared Services Canada. We tried to expand upon this to include the civilian members who voluntarily transfer from the RCMP to SSC. However, Treasury Board and the RCMP were opposed to any extension of these benefits for those civilian members who voluntarily leave the RCMP under any circumstances.
Robert, can you explain for us how the hours of work will be changing for civilian members?
In the RCMP, we currently work a 40-hour work week, 8 hours per day, which include a 30-minute meal break. We are required to be available for duty during our meal break. Under collective agreement, the meal period is unpaid and the employee works a 37.5-hour work week. While civilian members have been pay matched based on our weekly and annual salary, our hourly rate of pay is actually less as a result. When we transition into the collective agreement, we will maintain the same annual salary and weekly pay. However, our hourly rate will increase by 6.67% as a result of removing the paid meal break. This means anything paid out at the hourly rate of pay, such as leave credits or overtime, will be at a higher hourly rate. If we are required to remain on duty during our meal break, we will be entitled to overtime.
So what will happen to the leave banks people have accumulated while with the RCMP when they are deemed into the public service?
In the RCMP, we have several different leave banks. For our existing annual leave bank credit, unused vacation leave bank will be maintained, and there will be no adjustment or reduction as a result of the change in hourly rate. This means that the cash value of the annual leave bank will increase by 6.67% at deeming if the member subsequently elects a payout. In the RCMP, we can carry over 400 hours from one year to another, which represents 10 weeks of vacation. Under collective agreement, the limit is 262.5 hours or 7 weeks. Because deeming will occur after March 31st of 2020, the carryover limit will not apply until March 21st, 2021, and any payout will be at the higher hourly rate. The same principle will apply for loop time credit. Our existing bank will be maintained upon deeming, and there will be no reduction to reflect the increased hourly rate. So the value of these banks will also increase by 6.67%. The rules for loop time accumulations are different under the collective agreement than in the RCMP. In the RCMP, the maximum that can be accrued as loop time at any time is 80 hours. We also have a separate operational response bank to a maximum of 80 hours or 160 hours for those members in isolated posts. Under a collective agreement, There is no limit on how much time can be accumulated during the year. However, the rule for carryover between years varies between the 6 collective agreements. In all of the collective agreements, any excess leave that is not used by a defined cutoff date will be paid out. The good news is that any payout will be at a higher hourly rate.
Thanks so much for all that explanation, Robert. And I just want to remind folks, because I know that there are questions coming in, we're actually using the chat function to track questions for today's session. So if you've been sending questions to the Q&A, what you need to do is select the chat bubble. It's going to open up the chat functionality. In the drop-down menu, you can select Ask a Question as the recipient and send your questions there. For those of you who have submitted questions to the Q&A, we'll absolutely take them, but just moving forward, just for when we get to the Q&A period, we just want to make sure it's very clear. Crystal, can you tell us a little bit about how vacation leave will be affected by deeming?
Yes, as you know, vacation was identified as a high priority by civilian members in the survey, and it was a high priority for our team as well. Civilian members in the RCMP accrue vacation at a superior rate to the collective agreement. Deeming was originally scheduled to take place in April of 2018, before it was postponed to the current date of May 21st, 2020. Had deeming proceeded in April as originally planned, I would have been only 9 days shy of my next increase under the RCMP vacation leave system. I was very concerned that I would not reach the next step and would have to wait an extra 8 years to gain another week of annual leave. It was really important to all of us on the team that we do whatever we could to prevent other members from being in the same position, or to at least mitigate this as best we could. The agreement addresses the transition of vacation leave in several ways. First, whatever your current level of entitlement is immediately before deeming will be protected and maintained when you enter the public service. For example, if you currently have 4 weeks of vacation, that 4 weeks will be maintained after deeming, even if you don't qualify for 4 weeks under the collective agreement. Second, you will retain that rate until you reach the next level under the collective agreement that is equal to or greater than your existing pre-deeming entitlement. Third, upon deeming, each civilian member will receive a one-time vacation entitlement of 5 days. This is normally provided to an employee at their 2nd anniversary of service within the public service, but will be granted to CMs upon deeming in accordance with the collective agreement. Fourth, each civilian member will be credited an additional vacation leave adjustment of 40 hours upon deeming. The Institute had sought through negotiations and mediation to obtain compensation for civilian members for the loss of status and the loss of benefits. However, the Treasury Board was rigidly opposed to any form of monetary compensation. On the final day of negotiations, the last item that was agreed to was the 40-hour vacation credit adjustment. With the combination of the one-time vacation leave of 5 days, the 40-hour vacation credit, and the 2 personal leave days that are available annually under the collective agreement, 85% of civilian members will realize an increase in paid leave over the course of an average 30-year career.
Thanks so much for explaining that, Crystal, and for all your help on the team. Daniel, can you explain the sick leave provisions for us?
Sure. The sick leave was another very challenging issue. I know firsthand how devastating and like a catastrophic illness or injury can be for a family, and how important our income replacement plan is to protect our family. So in the RCMP, we have what's considered to be an unlimited sick leave system. We really wanted to protect this for civilian members. However, Treasury Board was not prepared to make any such concession. Under the collective agreements, employees are granted sick leave at the rate of 15 days per year, or 9.375 hours per month. Sick leave credits granted but unused are accumulated in the employee's sick leave bank. The disability insurance plan at 70% of your monthly salary is only payable after 13 continuous weeks of total disability, or when your paid sick leave bank is exhausted, whichever is greater. So under the existing Treasury Board policy, public service employees transferring into the collective agreements from an employer who didn't have a sick leave bank are generally granted 5 days for each year of previous service. PIPSC retained So as part of this process, PIPS retained an actuary to assist our team in examining the shortfalls with this approach to sick leave and the income replacement shortfalls to members transferring from the current sick leave plan. We also examined the employer's data with respect to sick leave usage within the RCMP, and we found that it was significantly less than the average usage in the core public service. So we identified two goals. The first was to ensure that every member, regardless of their service, would at the very least have enough sick leave to cover the 13-week waiting period. And the second goal was to ensure that the amount of sick leave credited was no less than what the average civilian member would have earned in their banks had they been subject to a bank throughout their career based on the average sick leave utilization rates. The agreement provides each civilian member upon deeming with a sick leave bank that is the greater of 13 weeks or 10 days for each year of service calculated at the rate of 6.25 hours for each completed month of service.
Thanks so much, Daniel. I also understand that the agreement protects the existing RCMP funeral and burial entitlements. Robert, can you explain those details to us?
Yes, thank you, Shelley. As a civilian members of the RCMP, there are benefits available to defray the cost of funeral expenses for the families of deceased civilian members, members who are killed in the line of duty, or upon death of a retired member to a veteran. This also includes burial in RCMP designated cemeteries. This can represent significant cost saving for the family of a member or retired member. Under the agreement, the employer has agreed to maintain these benefits and entitlements for former civilian members. Upon retirement, these entitlements will continue until death.
Thanks so much for explaining that. Crystal, can you tell us about the protection of retirement relocation benefits?
Yeah, this is another issue that can represent a significant cost for civilian members who have relocated during their careers. I am one of 247 civilian members in PIPS who are eligible for retirement relocation, and the costs of moving are significant. When they closed the labs in Regina, I had two choices: find another job or move my family to Edmonton to keep my position within the RCMP. Two important factors for me and my family in choosing to stay with the RCMP was having the cost of my relocation paid and the promise made to me by the RCMP that I would be able to relocate back upon retirement with the cost covered by them. Fortunately, the agreement retains the retirement relocation benefit for those who are eligible due to a relocation that occurred prior to deeming.
Thanks so much, and I'm sure that must have been a relief to you and your family. Robert, are there any other items resolved through negotiations? Pardon me, Crystal, maybe you can cover that one.
Yeah, there are several issues that were addressed in negotiations that have resulted in a commitment letter from the RCMP. The RCMP has provided PIPS with a letter confirming several items. In the RCMP, we have some members who start work at 6 a.m. However, for some collective agreements, this would be outside of the normal hours of work. The RCMP has agreed to continue 6 a.m. start times where operational requirements permit. Civilian members currently have access to a maximum of 60 minutes of personal fitness time weekly. The RCMP has also agreed to allow this to continue where operational requirements permit. There are also two situations under the RCMP terms and conditions which are recognized for leave with pay, which are not specifically recognized under the collective agreement. These are to assist in relocating a widowed parent or an orphan sibling and to visit a person who is certified as being critically ill. The letter recognizes these as situations a member may request leave with pay under the collective agreement. The letter also addresses operational readiness. We had considerable discussion about this issue at the negotiation table. After deeming, the standby provisions of the collective agreement will apply. However, if the RCMP requires a member to remain on a work site after hours, whether it's their work location or a temporary location, those situations will be treated as overtime.
Thanks for providing that clarification. Before we move on to questions from members, are there any other issues that the team would like to address?
Yes, Shelley, we would like to speak briefly to the issue of overtime. We have had a number of questions come forward from the members concerning this item. In the RCMP, members working overtime on a rest day are presently compensated at double time. The language in the collective agreement varies, but as a general rule, overtime worked on the first day of rest is paid at time and 1/2. This is something we advocated to maintain after deeming the double time. However, Treasury Board and the RCMP were strongly opposed for several reasons. They did not want to maintain a superior provision in the collective agreements that could be pointed to as a precedent by other groups and members. They were determined to maintain consistency between the public service and incoming civilian members, and they also argued that Phoenix was a barrier to maintaining a separate pay category. While we don't agree with their position, it was clear that we would not get a deal if we held firm on our position with respect to overtime. Our analysis of the data provided by the employer did indicate that the impact of members working overtime at time and 1/2 as compared to double time would be mitigated by the increase in the hourly rate. Nevertheless, there is a loss, and this is something we pointed to in support of compensation.
Thank you so much for providing that detail, David. We're now, and I want to thank all the presenters and also the negotiation team for the incredible work that you've undertaken. Sounds like you had a challenging job to do and really came through. We're going to go to questions now. Our first question is from Wesley, and Wesley's asking, what if we change positions to another group represented by PIPS or another bargaining agent, keeping the MOA terms, I believe is what he's looking for.
So essentially what the agreement provides is that as long as you're employed by the RCMP or for those civilian members working at Shared Services Canada, you can change positions provided you stay in the PIPS bargaining unit. We did try to expand this beyond the RCMP and Shared Services Canada. However, Treasury Board was opposed to that. And we know that CAPE, the other union, also had had pursued this issue as well with the same results. So from a practical standpoint, if you stay in the PIPS bargaining unit in the RCMP but change positions, you'll keep all of your benefits. If you do leave the RCMP or Shared Services Canada, but stay in the public service after deeming, you would still keep your Group 1 pension status. You would also, your credits for sick leave and vacation that are granted at deeming, you would still retain those. So the two benefits that you would not be able to take with you automatically would be the funeral and burial benefits, as well as the retirement relocation. There could also be an issue with respect to your vacation entitlement, depending where you are and whether or not your next employer will honor what you have accumulated, what stage you're at on the vacation scale. So, but there may also be the ability to negotiate that when you're looking at changing positions.
Thanks, David, for that clarification. Our next question comes to us from Kevin. Kevin's asking, is there an opportunity for CMs to be recognized for periods of acting when calculating pension benefits?
Under the collective agreements, acting pay is pensionable, whereas a CM it's not. So that will be an added benefit that we would get.
Wonderful. Thanks, Crystal, for that answer. We've got another question from Wesley. Why can't our optional life insurance policies be kept through continued payment at the same rate via the member's bank account? Has this option been looked at? And then there's a question about payroll. Can we do direct deposit and direct withdrawal?
So, and there's this kind of complicated answer to this question. So the first is that in the collective agreements, we do not negotiate insurance and health benefits. Those are dealt with through the National Joint Council. So we have no scope to negotiate those in collective bargaining. The second piece is that the public service, in the public service, as part of the pension program, all civilian members will be subject to mandatory insurance at a level, I think it's 2 times salary when you come into the public service. So that is required of every employee. It's not negotiable and is mandatory. So that will eliminate the the plan that's available in the RCMP. And from looking at what the RCMP is essentially then winding up the base insurance program, which the optional insurance is tied to. So the likelihood of being able to maintain, for an insurance carrier to maintain one insurance program, as opposed to when the base insurance program is no longer available, is I don't think is practical. So members do have the option. There is in the info web information that's been provided by the RCMP the ability to get a quote on maintaining your optional insurance. Through PIPS, we also have access to insurance through Service Plus. So I've also encouraged members to look at what's available for insurance on the Service Plus website, because those rates are competitive as well.
Thanks so much, David. Our next question comes to us from Benjamin. Benjamin's asking, does the term adjustment mean that our leave bank increases by 40 hours, which when then renews each year, or is that effectively a one-time addition that does not renew once used?
I can answer to that. It's a one-time adjustment. It's a compensation that we sought for all the loss that we suffered through deeming. So it's a one-time 40 hours, and you'll get that on deeming day.
So our next question comes to us from Sean. Article 40 of the proposals of changes to the agreement of the Computer Systems Group is titled Correctional Service Specific Duty Allowance. Speaks to the fact that a $4,000 allowance is to be negotiated for specific employees of Correctional Services Canada, those who perform certain duties or responsibilities such as the custody of inmates. Have you been approached by, or are we aware of civilian members groups that would be in the same situation? As an example, as a forensic analyst in the RCMP Technological Crime Unit, I'm expected to attend crime scenes, assist in search warrants, have potential to be exposed to dangerous substances, blood, drugs, expected to testify as an expert in court. I'm exposed regularly to offensive images, videos, and I'm mandated to attend annual sessions with the psychologist. Despite this, we are paid exactly as any other CM in our category.
So I can speak to that. There is I'm sorry, the question was just removed. I can't see the person's name. Sorry, Sean is quite right. There is a provision in several of the collective agreements, both the CS and the SP I'm familiar with, that does allow for people that are working in correctional facilities to receive a special allowance. That is not an existing term and condition with the RCMP. The scope of our bargaining for this memorandum of agreement was specifically on how we migrate the civilian members into the collective agreements based on your existing terms and conditions. So it was not something that was addressed in these negotiations. It would not apply to the circumstances that Sean has described, but it certainly, I think, it warrants further examination, Sean, in terms of proposals for the next round of bargaining. So it may be something that members want to submit a proposal to your group in the future for future negotiation.
I think that's really strong advice, David. And one of the things that we talk a lot about at bargaining with our other group members is how bargaining is very much an iterative process. And so laying the groundwork for the things that we want to get to the next round is always important. So starting to organize and think about that now is great. We have another question, this one coming from Mike. Upon deeming, I will be less than 1 year away from my 5th week of vacation. Does this mean I will have to wait until 18 years instead of the current 10?
Sure, I can speak to that. So if you're 1 year away from your 5th week of vacation, that likely means you've got 9 years service in the RCMP at deeming. So you'll be at 4 weeks until such time as you will receive 2 additional days at 16 years, and then an additional day for a total of 3 at 17, and then 2 more additional days for a total of 5 at 18. So not quite the 18 years, but a bit at 16, a bit more at 17. Also, in order to minimize the impact of having to wait that additional time, the 40-hour adjustment plus the 5 days and the 2 annual personal days makes it so that you'll be significantly better off for a portion of your career between now and waiting for that additional week for a total of 5 weeks.
Thanks so much, Daniel. Our next question comes to us from Jessica. Jessica's wondering, did you say that the CSs can only carry over 37.5 hours 1 week of vacation per year?
No. So it's lieu credits can only be carried over to a maximum of 37.5 to the CS group. There are caps for vacation for under the collective agreements of essentially 7 weeks. Robert talked about that. But as compared to 10 weeks in the RCMP, there will be no impact at deeming. In fact, the value of your existing vacation and lieu credits will go up at deeming because of the increase in the hourly rate. As well, that will affect the amount of time off you can take because you're going to be working a shorter day, at least in terms of the 7.5 versus the 8-hour day. But in on March 31st of the year following deeming, there would be a cap on, the cap would be lowered. For lieu time, it would be 37.5 hours, and for vacation, it would be 7 weeks.
Thanks, David. Our next question is from Sean.
One more thing.
Robert.
And if I may, as we've been told by Treasury Board for the last few years, because of Phoenix, the cap wasn't enforced. They're not in a position to pay out the vacation at this point. So if the condition of Phoenix is the same, it's likely that there won't be any cash out of the vacation at this time.
Okay. So our next question is from Sean. Are the leave allocations carried over each year?
I'm assuming we're talking about like leave bank here?
I'm wondering if that's in reference to the 2 one-time adjustments that we described. So,
yeah.
So I think there is a 40-hour credit. It's a one-time adjustment that will take place at the time of deeming, and as well a 5-day adjustment as a result of the one-time entitlement under the collective agreement, but those only occur once.
And those don't apply to a leave carryover cap?
No.
Yeah, they're not in the back.
So our next question comes from Kevin. Will sick leave banks carry forward each year over year? What happens to the sick leave bank at the end of your career?
So, go ahead, sure.
I can take this one. So yes, your sick bank will carry forward year after year. So all the bank you'll get on deeming day plus everything you're gonna earn for the rest of your career, you're gonna keep with you till your retirement. But on retirement, everything goes away. There's no cash value for these days.
The one thing I would add to that as well is, as some of you have probably seen on the PIPS website or heard discussions about the Employee Wellness and Support Program. And this is something that's still in development and is all of the members, including the civilian members, will have the opportunity to vote on in 2020. But what will happen under that plan is that the 13 weeks we described as the waiting period for disability insurance will increase to 26 weeks. So it'll be important for those more senior members to maintain those sick days, because should you be in a situation where you have you're off on sick leave for an extended period of time, you'll be able to maintain your pay. Anything above the first 26 weeks, you'll be able to use your sick leave that's in your bank that's above 26 weeks to extend the period before you'd have to go on 70% disability insurance. So there's no value when you retire, but there's certainly a value for members who may have a long-term illness or injury later in their careers.
And for those of you who aren't familiar with the collective agreements, public servants earn 15 sick days per year.
So there's a clarification, just confirming that if a member has 20 years of pensionable service will they receive 200 hours of sick leave?
Yes.
20 years times 2, so it's 40 weeks.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not 200 hours, so.
So I'm just going to let folks know that we are starting to run out of time. We've got 2 more questions that we're going to take. If we were not able to get to your question, we will be able to follow up by email to the best of our ability. And bear with us, and the only reason we're kind of a bit tight for time is we have a French session happening momentarily after this one. So we've got 2 last questions. I'm going to read them both out, and then we'll take them in turn. So the first question comes from Kevin, asking, is there a current staffing action underway when deeming occurs? Does the process continue as a CM, or does it transition to a PS process? And then the last question comes to us from Jessica. Jessica asks, how many occasions on many occasions I've heard that CMs should wait to apply for PS positions until after we are deemed, because many of the benefits we have as CMs, i.e. 30 years to retirement versus 35 years as PS, vacation days, etc., I will be lost if we become PSs now. Once we are deemed, if we apply for a position outside of the RCMP, will this still not be the case?
So I can take that one quickly. Yes, you're right. You should wait after deeming to apply outside the RCMP. For the pension is, right now we are considered to be Category 1 pension. And if you leave the RCMP at this point, you'll become a Category 2. And yes, the impact is significant. So, but once you are deemed, you only tend to lose the retirement relocation and the funeral and burial entitlement. So once you're deemed, you don't tend to lose as much as you would right now.
Well, and I think the other thing with respect to the sick leave is that generally when people leave and go into another employer, they're going to be granted 5 days of sick leave per year of service, whereas under this agreement, after deeming, you'd be entitled to 10 days of sick leave for each year of service.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, 20 years of service is equivalent to 200 days of sick leave, not 200 hours.
Are you able to answer that top question, Daniel?
Well, yeah, so the current staffing actions underway when deeming occurs, does the process continue as a CM? Okay, so essentially, the staffing action is identical whether it's a civilian member position or a public servant position. The only time that the differences split one side or the other is at time of hiring. So the process is identical, therefore the process can begin now, and if it ends prior to deeming, you would get hired as a CM. But if it ends after deeming, you would get hired as a public servant.
But we don't hire any new CMs, so any staffing process right now is already aligned with the PS.
This is correct, yeah.
And so technically, deeming shouldn't have any impact on the staffing process.
That's right.
But there should be a staffing blackout for a few months just prior to deeming.
There will be a controlled period where staffing will be limited for possibly a 5-month period prior to deeming in order to stabilize the HR system.
Okay, so one other point I just wanted to touch on very quickly. First of all, we want to thank all of the members who have sent an email from the PIPSC website to the RCMP Commissioner with respect to Phoenix. We're really concerned that the RCMP and Treasury Board still intend to push our members into the failed disastrous Phoenix pay system. To date, 600 members have sent emails through this portal, and we would encourage those who haven't to still do so, please. We do have other actions planned in the weeks and months ahead to keep pushing this issue. Our President, Debbie Davio, will be following up with the RCMP Commissioner and as well the Office of the Human Resource, I can't remember it's a long title, OCRO. Anyways, there are steps being taken to keep pushing this. We do not want to see people going into a pay system that could result in you not being paid properly.
So thanks everybody for participating in today's session. I'm sorry that we were running a little short on time. If we weren't able to cover your question during today's session, we'd be happy to follow up by email. But also please know that you are always welcome to email civilian_members@pips.ca. That email address is monitored by our team. Before we conclude, I would like to bring your attention to the representational services available through PIPS to assist you with any workplace issues you may encounter. Whether this is before deeming, during the deeming process, or once deeming is completed, our team is available to assist you. The employment relations officers listed on this file are experienced workplace representatives on staff with PIPS who are supporting RCMP members across the country. I want to thank our presenters today, Daniel, Crystal, Robert, David, again for participating in today's session and for all their incredible work and dedication in obtaining the best possible deal for civilian members. I know that this team has worked tirelessly on your behalf, and I think the results really do speak for themselves. I'd also like to thank you for all your thoughtful questions and participation in today's session. We're eager to connect more with CMs and would love to support in continuing these important conversations in the workplace. If you're interested in arranging an information session, if you'd like to get involved with us, you can always email mobilization@pips.ca. And again, if we didn't get to your question, we will follow up by email, but I will also just let you know that there is another English session starting